What if I told you that some of the most important and memorable conversations in our lives, past or present, don't feel important when they happen? And the last conversations that we have with people that we love, care about, maybe sometimes the last conversation that we'll ever have. And in that, we never know when that last time ever happens. Because you never really think the last conversation's ever going to be the last one. There's no alert. There's no dramatic goodbye, no warning, no music playing somberly. Nobody tells you that last conversations, those last words are completely ordinary. But when it's the last time, no one realizes that moment becomes a conversation that you replay in your head for the rest of your life. Conversation, event, memory, action. So today's episode is not just about grief and saying all of that. It's about love, memory, closure, motherhood, healing, and learning how to keep living when part of your world is no longer physically here. With that being said, my name is Reginald Holloway, and this is another episode of Outreach with Reggie. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone. My name is Reggie Holloway, and welcome back to another episode of Outreach with Reggie. If you're just tuning in, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and click that notification button and tune in to everywhere you listen to podcasts, no matter if it's in the States or across the world. First and foremost, at the time of this recording, it is officially Mother's Day. And as it's Mother's Day, I want to dedicate this episode to all of the mothers, single mothers, mothers in marriages, committed relationships, mothers who are striving, mothers who are surviving, who feel like they're alone. And most importantly, I want to dedicate this episode in particular to my mother. Now, Mother's Day is an opportunity where we honor our mother for the work that they've been able to do for us, the care that they put into us, how they show up, how they take care of the household, and how they show up for us no matter what, how they nurture us, care for us like so. The love that they pour into us that keeps us going. This is the day that we pour into them. Now, Mother's Day, oftentimes enough, or at least for the past 2 years, looks a lot different for me. But I'll get into that much, much later. Last episode, I shared pieces of my foster care journey. The instability, the uncertainty, the emotional weight of trying to figure out who you are while life keeps shifting underneath your feet. But there's another side to that story. A side about grief, about loss, about motherhood, and about closure. How learning to continue living when some of the people who helped shape your world are no longer physically in it. And ironically enough, this is really part 2 of that foster care journey. Because foster care isn't just about systems. It's about relationships. It's about attachment. It's about identity, and it's about love. And sometimes it's about loss. But as we analyze loss, we have to understand when a story ends, when the chapter closes, And when we look at closes or closure, I'll share with you what I felt. Growing up, I used to think closure was this thing where it was going to be cinematic, right? My understanding of closure came basically from the movie Antoine Fisher. Growing up in the foster care system, I thought meeting my mom or seeing my mom again and having a conversation, it was going to be just like that. We were going to sit down and say what was going to need to be said. We were going to laugh. We were going to cry. We were going to hug and apologize. And somehow everybody would have walked away healed. And I carried that with me. But it didn't really work out like that. And in life, it doesn't really work out like that at all. Sometimes closure never comes. And it's actually a luxury when we're able to find closure. It's not something that's entitled, but it is a gift, what I've learned it to be. Sometimes people leave before the conversation happens. Sometimes relationships end unfinished. And sometimes people hurt you and never acknowledge it. Sometimes people die before the healing conversation ever takes place. And that's a difficult reality to sit with. And I think one of the hardest parts of adulthood is realizing that some questions may never get answers. Some wounds may never get explanations. And some people may never become who we hoped they would become. But over time, I started to ask myself different questions. Maybe closure isn't always about getting answers. Maybe closure is acceptance. Maybe closure is saying, I may never fully understand this, but I refuse to let it destroy my future. And honestly, sometimes closure is not even needed, because some people spend years chasing one final conversation, hoping it will heal them. But when really the healing has to come from within. But I will say this. If you do have the opportunity for closure, please take it. Say the words, ask the questions, tell people you love them, because pride has robbed a lot of people from hearing I love you for one last time. And the truth is, we never know what words will become our last with someone. As we go into the next segment, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. We may never know what will become our last words with somebody. Because words carry weight. Because moments are temporary. It goes off through the expression, it's not what you said, it's what you made me feel. But in the same time, words are powerful. Not just because of what they mean in a moment, but because how they echo after someone's gone. After loss, you start replaying conversations differently. You start remembering the little details, the tones of voice. The way somebody laughed, the pauses, the little things you ignored at the time. And sometimes grief turns your memory into a search engine, right? You search every conversation trying to find the hidden meaning, trying to find peace, trying to figure out if there was something you missed. I think that's why loss changes people. Losing someone changes people. Because suddenly time no longer feels guaranteed. And it isn't. And that realization can either make people softer or harder. For me, it made me a lot more intentional about my relationships. I'm more intentional about checking in on people, more intentional about saying I love you, more intentional about being present, because one thing grief teaches you very quickly is this. Nothing in this world is promised. Not tomorrow, not next week, not another phone call, not even in the next hour. And sometimes we assume people We assume people know how much we love them when we've never actually said it out loud. Believing that the action of doing for someone consolidates or covers the actual saying it. Remember hearing it so many times before of, look how much I've done for you. How could you be so entitled? Maybe the action of doing for someone is simply saying, I love you. I care about you. I'm thinking about you today. Those words that go often unsaid. How are you? Beyond just asking, just trying to be nosy. How are you? Beyond, are you all right? But are you actually all right? And also being in the space to receive that too. And if I can ask the viewer or listener this, when's the last time someone asked you if you were okay? And actually wanted to know, not to be nosy, but to genuinely help. But as we ponder on that question, we're going to move into the next segment, which is the psychology of grief and loss. I was talking to my therapist, and he explained to me that grief is nonlinear, and there's actually a chart. And when I Googled this chart, right, I Googled the chart where it looked like spaghetti, right? It's overlapping up and down like a roller coaster, right? Because there's not really, it's not really a linear path to grief. Sometimes the grief whispers, sometimes it screams. And the trigger to that, it's random. Songs, smells, holidays, traditions, silence, seeing other people with their mothers, and even so much so, just random occurrences. And when Mother's Day comes around, grief can become very loud. Grief is one of the strangest human experiences because grief is not just a sadness, it's a disruption. It changes your routines, your emotions, your concentration, your body, your sleep, your appetite, your sense of safety, all of these things, right? It doesn't even look emotional at first. You don't just wake up bawling out in tears. No, it looks very numb of the day, angry, exhausted, or silent. We don't just grieve people. We grieve the version of ourselves that we knew around the person. We grieve childhood experiences that you didn't get a chance to have, or childhood experience you did get a chance to have. It's the overall memories that came in association with this person that you lost. Places, seasons, dreams, stability, identity. There are people listening right now grieving somebody who is still alive, and that grief is real too. Because losing someone isn't just of death. It's also because of a fallout. A fallout because of different beliefs, different points of view. Some silly, but some very, very serious. But through therapy, one thing I've learned that grief is not linear. There is no finish line to grief. There is no confetti. There's no timer. There's no formula. Some day grief whispers, and some days it screams. Some days you can laugh and function normally. In other days, all it takes is a smell, a song, or a random memory that can completely break you down. But as I talk about it, and as we celebrate Mother's Day today, as you sit there carrying the memories, right? I think about how Mother's Day is important because mothers carry so much that often goes unseen. The emotional labor, the sacrifices that they've had to do, the stress that comes with the role of a mother, protection, the nurturing, the constant worrying. A lot of us don't fully understand our mothers until we become adults ourselves, until we realize how hard this life is. With everything going on in the world, nothing is more comforting than a hug from your mom. And how much they carried while still trying to love us through what's going on right now is a beautiful testament to their strength. And when I think about Mother's Day, and when I think about motherhood, I think about my mother. Not just what she went through, but who she was. But in order for me to say that, I have to share the part two to my foster care story, which is explaining who my mom was. So here we go. First and foremost, my mom was human. And I say that intentionally because some of us, after people pass away, we only talk about them like they were perfect. But my mom, she was human. She had her strengths. Along with that, she had her struggles. She had dreams. She had pain. She had moments of resilience and moments where life probably overwhelmed her too. But regardless of everything, she was still my mom. The first memory of my mom was at a Fulton County courthouse, the Fulton County Juvenile Courthouse. And I remember how tall she was. And I called her, "Hey, Dad." It's like, "Boy, that's not your dad, it's your mom." And she was tall and she had these dreads and she picked me up so high. And I remember as we went to go to my grandmother's house, who we stayed with for quite some time. Seeing her and seeing all my siblings again, how special that was to me. By this time it was February 2004. I was 5 years old. And I remember how we had to sleep in the crawl space at the time of my grandmother's house. Because at the time, and I went back to the house of my grandfather and grandmother. They both passed away, but it looks a lot different now. But at that time, we slept in the crawl space with my youngest sister and my other siblings. But my mom, this is around the time when my mom, she tried her darnest. I wouldn't notice until much later, but she was carrying 2 jobs alone because my father passed away. A part of that, I would see her make efforts. My mom, I watched her go through her struggles, oftentimes enough, seeing her get arrested at a young age. She would be gone a lot of the time, only seeing her in parts. And it wasn't until the last time where we moved into a townhouse in Fairburn. And as I'm watching her, and now the grandmother and grandfather are gone, My great-grandmother passed away before we left to move into our own place. I watched my mom. She would have us go to bed at 7 p.m. because she had to go to work. And as she was going to work, luckily enough, thank God, that no one came into the house and did anything to us. But she would go home. She would go to work at 7, like 7 around 8 or something like that. And come back just in time for us to wake up and go to school. But as my mom tried to balance 2 jobs with me being one of 4 siblings, I saw how stress got to her. Stress of not having enough. I watched my mom have a car, purchase a car, save enough for a car, only for that car to her to get in a car accident. I remember times when family members would buy us groceries until we couldn't anymore. And Mom, I was laughing about this with my sister. Mom, at times, because we'd had so little, she would give us bread for dinner, which I laugh about it with my sister now because it fed my sister's now addiction to bread and my addiction to Jiffy cornbread, but that's neither here nor there. And I had opportunity to had a front row seat to what my mom was going through. There was only a little bit that she could have hid that allowed me to appreciate my mom. When I was a kid, when I was younger, I carried a hurt of feeling like I was abandoned. But now I have her appreciation for what she tried to do. But even then, I was hurt and I missed my mom as any young man would at that age of 5 to 6. I would bring food home from school, praying that the milk didn't sour before I got home or it didn't bust in my book bag. Praying that, if we got just enough, I could take home and help feed my sisters and my brother. And I carried a frustration like, man, I want some cereal too, but seeing my sisters being able the opportunity to eat provided a sense of happiness and joy that I felt, knowing that I could have helped my mother. I remember my mom loving Fantasia, but I also remember my mom, at times during her struggle around the American Idol finale, not being there because she went to go do what she did. So it provided more sadness, but my mom was playful when she was there. Oftentimes we tried kung fu moves on each other and she would get the best of me, I will admit. And yeah, those moments I carry with me all the time. I remember how she would handle it when my brother would get seizures. How we would share from her TV to my TV. We would share one cable cord. So anything I was watching, she was watching. Anything that she was watching, I was watching. And oftentimes enough, those came with whoopings because I would watch Family Guy. And I wasn't supposed to watch Family Guy. But these are things that, I've learned to appreciate. I talked about it last episode, but I remember the last night. I remember the times before when the defects officer came with groceries and McDonald's. And I remember the last night I spent with my mom as a kid, being 6 years old and being in a place where, my mom coming to me New Year's Day 2005 with $10. And I know she didn't have $10 to give. So I said no. I don't know why I said no. I just knew we didn't have it. And she cried. She bursted into tears. And I got to saw a human trying with no real help. Not from what I've seen. Sure, my uncles were for us. We went slept over their house when my mom had to take care of my brother and call the emergency people. And I saw my grandmother and grandfather step in when they could. But I also saw what my mom was experiencing in real time. Even my memory goes back so far to remember where I was when I was 5 and 6. I saw my mom under the floor, under the door bed, right? Wrap up, package up Christmas gifts. I remember her scraping up just enough to hold on to tell me the tooth fairy was coming. Sometimes the tooth fairy never came. But but I knew it was my mom, and I knew she gave me her best. Sometimes I would get a tooth that was for 25 cents. Other times it was for 50 cents and $1. But I knew that was for my mom, and she tried. But as I remember all of those things, I remember when my mom was taken away from me. I remember when my mom was taken away from me, and I also remember that feeling of being told, you'll see her when you're 18. And my young mind couldn't even see past 7. And the next time I would see her on a visitation, I was a lot older then. This was 7, so I was 10. And by this time, throughout all the abuse I would receive up to that point, it began to take a toll on me. And as I was replaying all of the things that was happening from a young age, the only thing I could process was abandonment. But I've learned to come to peace with the young man who was then. But at the time, I was fueled with anger from my trauma. And as I say that now, seeing my mom's face when I was filled with so much rage and anger, she cried. And I had to accept that, along with accepting the fact that my mom's rights getting wiped away, along with my grandfather passing around that time. It wouldn't be until I was 17, getting ready to be adopted, to where my mom came up again. This time I was in foster care, and for those who wonder the gap between, I explained it in last episode. But I was up for adoption, and my case manager, she expressed to me I either have the option to go with my mom or this wonderful military family. And of course, I went with my mom, not knowing the full scale, which ultimately resulted in me contacting her for a moment. Well, we got a chance to talk, and I got a chance to pick her brain, and to be honest, I really didn't get much, because she was just so happy to hear from me, but I had so many questions as a youth. Where was my father? Who was my family? all of these things. And after another empty promise and just coming to the realization that she was in no way, shape, or form in a capacity to take care of me because she was living in Section 8 housing, from what I was told. It was something that reopened a wound that I didn't like. So ultimately, I didn't meet with my mom for some time. Fast forward to now I'm in college, and it's COVID time. And in COVID, my first cousin reaches out to me and tells me the other half of what my experience was when we left, when I went back into foster care for a second time, back in 2005 and after. And he explains to me the full scale of why it was better for me to be in foster care. And because of that, he also explained to me that my mom didn't have much time left. So if I wanted to reconnect with her, now it would be the time. Fast forward to 2 years later, I was notified by a good friend, a former friend, that my mom left a huge comment under one of my Instagram post. And I wasn't ready mentally to meet with her or have any interaction with her. But she would tell me how she got in contact with my sister, with my first foster parent since I got back into care. So after reconnecting with my sister, this was around the same time where I became homeless while in college. And during my time of homelessness, I went to a beautiful school to get my grades back up in North Georgia Tech. And during spring break of that time, I went over to a mentor's house to sleep on their couch. But I had opportunity to spend the week with my sister. And because of an old friend, I kind of had my sister meet, and my sister told me, hey, you should have a conversation with mother. Which ultimately, I'm able to admit now it wasn't the best conversation to have, because it reminded me of all the triggers that I had and all of the issues that I had and all of the things that came up of the absence of where she was. But what my sister was explaining at the time and everything I was feeling, I said, you know what? I'll have a conversation with her. But I did not know that it would be my last conversation with my mother. So here it is. The last conversation with my mother. And yeah, it was for an hour, right? It was for an hour. And when I talked to my mom, the first 5 minutes, everything came out. Everything that I felt, but the times where I felt abandoned, the times where she would go out and do what she did, the times where I felt like I was robbed of a childhood for having to grow up so fast, all those times, and even times where I needed a mom to help me navigate things that every other child got a chance to. Within those 5 minutes, I let it all out. But then after those 5 minutes, and thankfully, I'm thankful that it seeded past those 5 minutes. because if the conversation ended after that, for it to be a 5-minute call, man, I would have a lot much regret for that to be the last one. But I did it. Once it got to minute 6 and we got past all of the dramatic, all of the things of trauma, all of the things of her not being there, it was like a calming wind, because my mom just fully admitted, like, how much she wasn't there completely, without any struggle, without any crying, without crying through the conversation. She just admitted, like, hey, I wasn't there. And I know mom by title, but by action, she fully admitted in her words that she wasn't there, and she was sorry. And for a while, in that moment, actually, not for a while, in that moment, after she said those things, which kind of speaks to like where I was at that time, right? I don't know why, but I immediately wanted to give her grace. So I told her how thankful am I, how she tried her hardest, that even though I didn't understand, I thanked her. Even though I was confused, the feeling of wanting to forgive her superseded the feeling of resentment. And in that, that was a call of God, or that was a call of, it had to be God. Because as much as I wanted to muster up anger, feeling of wanting to blame her for things that she didn't really have any association for outside of her not being there, I just didn't have it in me. 20 years worth of her not being there, I just really pent up in like the ocean. It's just washed away once we talked. And then from there, she told me how she was checking in on how or what I was doing and how I was doing. All the things that I got a chance to do, or that she got a chance to do, seeing all of the short films I was a part of. And lastly, she had a simple request. She accepted the fact that I didn't want her. I said in a very hurt position that I didn't want her in my life. And her last words that she said to me was 2 things: never to put my hands on a woman, and promise her for her to meet her grandchildren. And of course, I finally got the opportunity to have a picture of my dad. One sole picture, because of course he passed away, which is confusing, right? I don't know, because first he passed away when I was born, before I was born. Then he passed away when I was a baby. I don't know, and I'll never know. But that's okay too. But that was the last conversation I had. We spoke for an hour, and then I remember looking at my sister, and she was like, I was expecting fireworks. I don't know why there weren't. But as I got back to school, and as I got back to doing all of these things, Mother's Day 2024 happened. And I remember where I was. I was still homeless, still trying to find a place to stay. And I did for the time being. And I would get a call from my first cousin. And by this time, it'd been 3 years since I spoken to him. And he just told me that she passed away. And she was found a week after Mother's Day. And it took some time. I don't know why, but I was just frozen. I cried and spent the entire summer trying to figure out why. My mom's funeral, she didn't get a funeral. She got a circle of life, which consisted of a lot of people who didn't really know her, co-workers and my one uncle. 7 people, a mass majority who had nothing to do with the family. And that replayed in my mind because to have that closure, at the same time having to take 5 classes, so trying to balance both 5 classes and the death of my mom hurt a whole lot, but it really broke my heart when my sister called me in tears. And telling her she had to be strong. Oh yeah, my first cousin sent a picture. The last image of my mom that I have is a picture of how she was found. As in, when they opened up, and I apologize for the listeners, but when they opened up her apartment and when they found her body, and if you have to skip this, please do, because it's going to get graphic. But I haven't seen my mom up until this point since I was 8 or 9 was the last visitation. So fast forward to about a week after, he tells me she's dead. He sends me a picture because, quote unquote, he could put on my big boy pants, and if he had to see it, I had to see it too. He sends me a picture of my mom decapitated, neck kind of falling off, skin peeling off. My mom's eyes were popped out. And maggots were eating her, with her tongue sticking out and her face falling apart. And from that point, I remember being so engulfed with frustration and pain. But I did not have the balance to I didn't have the time to even mourn because I had 5 classes I had to take because I needed to graduate. And for those who may say, Reggie, you should have took a semester off. I didn't have the capacity to take a semester off because FAFSA was already spent, and I was already knee deep in loans. So I had to graduate as soon as I could before I couldn't have any more money to use. And it hurts me a little bit because I wanted my mom to see me graduate, to see me do all of these amazing things. And I struggled because she never got a chance, and she will never get a chance to see what I get a chance to do now. And that's the part that hurts the most. But fast forward a year later, I think it was around the time I was getting ready to speak at a conference, the Embark Conference, last October. By this time, something very traumatic happened to me, but I won't say that on this platform. But long story short, I had to put on a brave face. And as I was writing this speech for this conference, I remember telling my sister, hey, I'm going to talk about mom and her struggles and whatnot and how it shaped me. And my sister telling me how she had to carry 2 jobs. And I didn't know she carried 2 jobs at the time. And that she was stressed because she had to do it alone. And I remember writing this beautiful anthology about my mom and how her hard work, along with the fact that I got a chance to look at her Facebook page and seeing who she was and how God was in her life the last few months of her life, that allowed me to write a beautiful send-off and allowed me to be in this space now. So, I know everybody, if you've stayed with me long enough, what about that story can you pull from? How is it impactful to you? What benefit is it for me to tell you this story? Well, it's simple. You never know when your last time is going to be. Last time to talk to somebody, to laugh, to cry, to have closure, right? But part of the closure is forgiving yourself. I can no longer call my mom nor dad, so I carry their voices inside. I don't forget, and I choose to think about the good of my mother. Healing is not forgetting. Healing is learning how to carry the memory differently. And healing looks different for everybody. It's not linear. Mother's Day is hard, yes. But the thing that I carry with me and how I honor my mother is recognizing her strengths, right? As I grieve, I still have to navigate adulthood, navigate advocacy. I still have to show up because people still need you while you're grieving. And that's one of the hardest parts. No matter if it's grieving the loss of somebody, either death, breakup, release, of just overall breaking, you're still needed in other aspects, no matter if you're a leader in any capacity of the word. That's the other half of it. It's a cost. It's the cost to the things that you may want. The higher you go, the more you lose. And people still need you while you're grieving. And to be still needed while I'm grieving, it's been interesting. It has forced me to learn emotional independence. Or actuality, it's learned for me to be emotionally dependent on God. I'm not afraid to say that grieving my mom has pulled me closer to God. It's also allowed me to redefine what family means, to learn how to keep going when I feel alone sometimes. And I won't lie, there are moments, including today on Mother's Day, where that loneliness feels heavy. Moments where I wish I could just hear their voices again. Moments where I could wish I could bring the things that I'm doing now and show my mom. Moments where I could just wish I could ask questions. Hey mom, I want to marry this person. How can I, you know, how should I go about it? How to know who to look for? And now I get to ask those questions to God. Moments where I wish I had guidance as a teen. Moments where I wish I wasn't so socially awkward. But those are the things that I carry, but I carry their memory, good memories of them with me. The way I speak, the way I care for people, the way I fight for justice, the way I survive, their fingerprints are still on my life. Her fingerprints are still on my life. The way I choose to love people, places, things, advocacy, all go off the rubric and formula that my mom has provided. I don't get to be the advocate that I am without seeing the mother that my mom was. And I think that's something beautiful about love. Death may change the relationship physically, but it doesn't erase impact. But as we talk about healing, not forgetting what has happened, he carried emotion, memory differently. Healing looks like therapy, journaling, community. It looks like crying. And sometimes it looks like finally allowing yourself to rest. Healing looks like surviving another day. I think one of the biggest lies people believe is that healing means you stop grieving. No, grief doesn't disappear when was real. Grief does not disappear when love was real. You just learn how to live alongside it. And there's no timeline for that, nor does it need to be. No perfect way to do it. No award pretending you're okay. There's no participation trophy for performative behavior, right? You're never going to get the Academy Award for acting like you're okay. You're never going to get an Oscar for the supporting actor for acting like things are all together. It's okay not to have it all together. I need people to hear that, especially people who feel pressure to always be strong. Leaders, advocates, especially people who are used to helping everyone else. And I say that to me as I say that to you. You are allowed to grieve too. You're allowed to fall apart sometimes too. You're allowed to be human. One of the greatest joys that I've learned for me is that if I can come to God broken and honest, I can trust in Him that He can repair me. So, as we're closing up, I want to leave you with this message here. You honor people not only by mourning their death, but by living the lessons they gave you. What lessons they were able to impute into your mind. That's how you honor them. You can do it by, no matter if it's anniversaries, traditions, storytelling, keeping photos, cooking their recipe if they were graceful enough to share it with you, continuing values, speaking their names. But overall, living their lessons. How kind they were to you. How kind they were to others. Impactful they were to others. Right? So as I close, if you still have a mother, if you still have your mother, call her. Hug her. Tell her you love her. Ask questions. Listen to her stories. Learn her heart while you still can. And if your mother is no longer here, I'm with you. And I hope you know grief is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that you are loved deeply. My mother may no longer physically walk beside me, but her fingerprints are all over my life. In the way I speak, in the way I fight for people, in the way that I survive. This episode is my love letter to her. And maybe it can help someone else write their love letter too. So with that being said, this has been another episode of Outreach with Reggie. Happy Mother's Day and take care. I love you all.